Wow, half a day.
Half a day.
It's been a while since I've been on stage, so I'm going to be very transparent. I'm completely and utterly nervous this morning, or this afternoon. But thank you all for being here today. I know that this is a subject that is very uncomfortable to talk about. So more importantly, thank you for showing up for yourself. Or if your organization told you you had to be here, thank you for being here anyway. Okay, so I'm going to set the stage for us because we're going to be talking about a subject that is, again, very uncomfortable for people to talk about. There's a stigma around it, and it's called grief, loss, death, right? More importantly, or more specifically, we're going to be talking about grief in the workplace. So I'm going to set the stage and take you back to July 17, 2015. My husband Frank was on his way to work, and he got into a tragic motorcycle accident. He was rushed to Naval Hospital. And as they were wheeling him into that emergency room, he was pronounced dead. Things moved really fast for me that morning. And before I knew it, I was in an ambulance on my way to GMH to escort my husband's body to the morgue. When we got to GMH, there were people waiting for us on the curb, in the emergency room, and more people waiting downstairs in the viewing room. I don't really remember who all was there, but I can tell you that there was a lot of Department of Correction officer uniforms in there, and I was like, who is running our prison if everybody is here from DOC? That's where Frank worked, by the way. And then I looked around the room again, and everybody from United was there. That's where I worked. And I thought, who is running our airline? Right? In the midst of my grief, I was so worried about everybody else. But I will tell you that the incredible support that I got that day was something that I will always be grateful for. We had 9 nights of rosaries, and every night we served food. We had many different organizations that stepped up and sponsored a night. The Air National Guard, Docomo Pacific, Guam Homeland Security, DOC, and my work family, United Airlines. They all showed up and brought a ton of food. There was people every night. There was love, support, hugs, prayers. It was more than I could ever ask for. On the day of Frank's funeral, I don't think I sat, not once. Because the line of people that came to give their condolences, to say goodbye to a great man, and to support me and my family never ended. There was even people that sneaked up during the family viewing just because they were late because they were at other funerals. During his funeral mass, not one seat was empty. People were standing in the back of the church, and even more outside of the church. You guys, this is my story, but it's not the only story. Our island community always shows up and shows out when someone dies. It's part of our culture. It's what we believe is the right thing to do. It's who we are as a people. Now let me fast forward 3 months after Frank's death. It's time for me to go back to work. Complete transparency, my work offered 4 days of bereavement leave. But I was an HR manager. I knew how to expand that leave. So I used up all of my paid leave, and that totaled 3 months. Was I ready to go back to work? Nope. But I didn't have a choice. It was either that or stay out of work on an unpaid leave of absence. I just lost my husband's income. I couldn't afford that. So here I was in the car, ready to go to the office. Probably sat in the car for about 30 minutes. Once I mustered up the courage to walk into the office, my coworkers welcomed me, open arms. I tried my best to put on a mask and act like I was fine. By the way, FINE stands for feelings inside not expressed. My coworkers, they felt sorry for me. They couldn't hide their sympathy. So it was awkward for all of us. Walked into my office, I turned on my computer, and I was greeted by hundreds of unread emails. All of a sudden, I was overwhelmed, I was feeling anxious, I was scared, I was confused. I was an HR manager, and I couldn't even remember who my business partners were. I didn't know what my central job duties were. Where do I begin? Who do I call? Again, this is my story. But you guys, there's so many stories like this out there. Let me see a show of hands. How many of you have experienced grief or loss in your life? Raise your hand. Just about all of us are raising our hands. We spend about 1/3 of our life at work. Yet, we invest next to nothing on a topic that 100% of us will eventually face, and that is grief and loss. But that's why we're here, right? To talk about that, to change the narrative, to create a safe space so that all of our employees, you included, won't feel isolated and judged when you have to return back to work. How many of you guys have heard of the Great Resignation? Anybody? Right? Okay, so for those of you that haven't, this was an economic movement during the pandemic, and the statistics were backed by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and it said that from April of 2021 and April of 2022, 71.6 million people in the United States left their jobs. That is 3.98 million people a month. Imagine the grief that CEOs and HR professionals and leaders and coworkers in a company felt because their staff was disappearing like wildfire. COVID-19 profoundly changed who we are as a human race. We had to wear masks. There was this thing called social distancing, 6 feet apart. We couldn't hug. We couldn't see family and friends. We had to stay home. And people were dying. There's data out there that says that over 1 million people at the beginning of the pandemic died from COVID-19. That means an estimated 9 million people were grieving the loss of those deaths. How many of you lost someone to COVID-19? Guys, we lived through an era that I'm sure most of us never thought we would ever see in the history of the world. But we did, and we're still suffering from the ramifications of COVID-19. Well, what that did was it brought this huge elephant in the room that used to greet me every night after my husband died, to remind me that my emotional health and my mental health was being compromised. That there were things that were happening in my life that shifted and changed, and I had no control over it. That's what COVID did to us. In the grief recovery method, we use this definition, and the definition of grief says that grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. I'm going to repeat that, it's a long definition. Grief is the conflicting feelings, right? We're conflicted by so many things that either ended or changed in our life that was familiar. When COVID hit, everything that we were familiar with changed or ended. We were all of a sudden having to stay home with our families, and oh wow, that was so great. We get to spend quality time together. Then I get phone calls. Dar, I'm gonna kill my daughter. She is invading my bubble. The only place that I can go and have privacy to talk to you is in my bathroom. And I'm turning on the water to make them think that I'm taking a shower. But really, I just need to breathe. They're invading my space, right? Familiar, unfamiliar, conflicting. Fear, lots of fear, right, of the unknown. So that great resignation affected the workplace in a way that many of us never thought would happen, right? It profoundly changed us. Work-life balance now all of a sudden is so much more important than having a job, making money. People want to travel the world. They realize that life is too short, right? I experienced that back in 2015. The rest of the world started to experience that in 2020 during COVID. That's my reality every single day, you guys. Right, so when you think about the workplace and the shift in how people think, what is important to them, we need to ask ourselves as leaders and as HR professionals, what can we do? What can we do to change the narrative? To make talking about grief, mental health, stress, things that people are going through in their personal lives okay and safe to talk about. I remember when I first joined the workforce and I got some good advice, at least I thought it was good advice from someone, and they said, don't ever bring your problems to work. Just don't, leave it at the door. You'll survive and you will excel at your job. Then I have my husband on the other side saying, don't bring your work home. I don't care what stress you had at work, leave it there. You guys, we're one person. We are one human being. How do you do that? Put on a mask? Wear different hats? How far is that going to take you? And how long can you do that before you explode? The Grief Recovery Institute did this study back in 2003. I haven't seen the more recent study that they did in 2017. But when I first joined the Institute, the study that they did said that there is this thing called the hidden cost of grief. And I was gonna use this, I had no idea, sorry, but I had no idea it was gonna be in the main ballroom. I thought it was gonna be in a more intimate style room with no tables, and you guys were literally gonna be like really close to me, and that didn't happen. So I'm really not gonna use this other than, hold on, let me just do something here real quick. Okay, excuse my art, it wasn't my favorite subject in school. Okay. Have to have the lashes. Okay, in grief recovery, this is what we call a heart with ears and no mouth. This is how we truly listen to somebody that's coming to us and talking about grief. When you think about your role in HR or as a leader or even as a coworker and someone comes up to you and wants to talk to you about something that is very personal and very emotional, remember this image. Take a picture of it if you want. It's my best artwork. You want to be a heart with ears and no mouth. You want to be able to just sit there and listen without judgment, without telling them how to feel. Members are never looking to be told how to feel, they're just looking to be heard. They want their story to be heard and acknowledged. They want you to know that their feelings matter. And that it doesn't matter if they're still grieving, they're gonna come back to work and they're gonna do the best that they can. So I'm here to share with you guys a few things that you can do as a leadership team in your organization, as HR, to change that culture in your workplace. But before I give you those tips, I want to just throw out some things to help you understand. Okay guys, so I'm just gonna give you a few things to kind of mull over so that you can understand how this works in your workplace and why why people have a hard time going back to work after they grieve. But let me just take it one step back. Looking at my notes here, I want to touch on the typhoon a little bit. How many of you guys are still dealing with the stress and the aftermath of typhoon? How do you pronounce it? Mawar? Mawar? Yeah? Right? Damaged homes, no power, no water, no internet. I remember trying to call my son, and he was like, Mom, I can't see you. My internet is so unstable. Sorry, Docomo, ITNE, GTA. No offense to you guys. I get it, right? It was natural disaster. But it was really frustrating that I couldn't reach my kids and find out how they were doing. Okay, so Typhoon Mawar, more local, right? And I want to bring that back to you guys and talk again and just remind you, the conflicting feelings caused by the end over change and a familiar pattern of behavior, the typhoon brought that to our island. You guys lost so much, right? I remember joking with my son and saying, I'm not coming to Guam until you have power. But it's real, and you guys suffered. You're still suffering. I was driving around the island with my daughter-in-law the other day, and my heart was broken to see all of the debris that's still piled up on the side of the road, right? You guys are still recovering. Businesses were affected, right? Many of them had to close for a while because they had no power, no water, no supplies. Their infrastructure was damaged. And so again, that is grief, you guys. It isn't just the death of a loved one. There are more than 40 life events that we will all experience as human beings that will bring on feelings of grief. So when your employees are going through grief, again, we call this the hidden cost of grief in grief recovery. Most of the time, companies are not going to look at these items as things that grief caused. So I want you guys to keep an open mind as I bring them up, okay? And I'll give you some examples. The first one is absenteeism. When someone is suffering the death of a loved one or a divorce, a delinquent child that is stressing them out, maybe the finances on the other side is not working out and they're having a hard time, going to work is unmotivating. And so what do? They call in sick. I remember being an HR manager and having an attendance policy that said, you're out 8 times and you're terminated. Didn't matter. Didn't matter what the reasons were. This is why I stayed out of work for 3 months. Because I knew that I was going to continue to call in sick because I wasn't ready to come back. Absenteeism is at the number one, it's at the top of the list for the hidden costs of grief, right? Why your employees don't show up. They are not motivated. They are still grieving. There's data out there that says that it takes people at least a year before they realize that they are entitled to get help after grief. So most people are going to walk around thinking that they can do this on their own, because I know I did that for a little while. I've helped many people that have said, Dar, I've been carrying this grief for 20 years. The statistics of 1 year, I don't know where that came from. Maybe they need to update it. 20 years, you guys. Think about yourselves and reflect on the things that you have lost throughout your life, not just as adults. One of the things that I have been studying and I have been really having a voice on is childhood trauma. Because I had childhood trauma. My mom's sitting right here, by the way. She's also a grief recovery specialist with me. But childhood trauma is real, you guys. It doesn't mean that it had to necessarily be abuse, although that is huge. It could be the simple things of go to your room, because I don't want to see that pout on your face. Come out when you're ready to act right. That is childhood trauma for a 6, 7, 8-year-old child. Because what you're telling them is that their feelings aren't valid. That you don't value how they feel, that it doesn't matter. That's childhood trauma, right? So grief is many different things that we have experienced throughout our life, and many of it comes from our childhood because we never learned as children how to manage our feelings, how to feel or acknowledge them, or feel safe to talk about them, right? As a teenager, when your parents said, hey, what's wrong? Nothing. I'm not going to tell you what's wrong with me. You're not safe because you always judge me, or you'll tell me how to feel, or you tell me that what I'm telling you is not important enough. That's childhood trauma, okay? So absenteeism is at the top of that list for hidden costs of grief. The next one is occupational injury. Again, I'm going to just share with you my experience. You guys, I wasn't a perfect HR manager. I wasn't a perfect leader. The course of my life in working. But I learned a lot of things along the way, and a lot of those were situations that I had to deal with, and things that I wish I could have did different. Things that I wish I could have said better. More that I could have done. Occupational injury is one of those. I was an HR manager that would sit on a panel and interview the employee that got injured on the job. And the kind of questions that we ask, now when I think about it in hindsight, I'm going, that never got to the root cause. And a lot of times the employee is feeling unheard, not validated. They're trying to tell us really why this happened. But we weren't listening because we were too black and white in our policies and the kind of questions that we ask, right? How much money can your company save in employees getting injured on the job if we just did more to create a safe culture? And I'm going to talk about that after this. Employee turnover. I talked about that earlier. The Great Resignation. The global pandemic did that. People were walking out of their jobs. When I left United, I was at 24 years and 10 months. And everyone said, you're crazy. Yeah, 2 more years before you hit 25. You get unlimited flying benefits in the front of the cabin without having to pay. And you're going to sacrifice 2 months for that? But for me, life was too short. I lost my husband in a motorcycle accident. He went to work that morning. He said goodbye and he kissed me, said I love you, and then he was gone. I didn't have 2 months, you guys. What I'm doing here right now, giving grief a voice, that became my purpose in life. That gave me the will to wake up every morning and live. Because I get to talk about Frank all the time. You know, he was one of those guys that he always wanted to just stay in the background. Babe, you go up. You talk. You say it. He didn't like to be center stage. But guess what, Frank? You have been center stage since I became a grief recovery specialist because I love talking about him. My reason to live, right? Diminished productivity. Remember earlier in my presentation, I said I didn't know what to do. Hundreds of unread emails. I was overwhelmed. Who do I answer first, second, or third? I don't know. Maybe we can ask my boss and ask her if my productivity went down. I'm guessing that it did. Right? I'm guessing that it did. Poor decision making is another one that is a hidden cost of grief. I used to be one of those employees that thrived in challenges and a stressful environment. I worked at the airport for 11 years before I moved over to the corporate side, and I loved it. Give me a irregular operation any day. Doesn't matter, I'll take it. I loved it. After Frank died, stuff like that overwhelmed me. I remember being at a Grant Cardone conference, one of his 10X conferences, and there was like 30,000 people there. And I had to psych myself out and say, Dar, you're here for personal development. It's okay, 30,000 people, don't let that scare you. And on the first day, I was good. On the second day, I don't know what happened, but my anxiety creeped in and I couldn't breathe. I felt the walls caving in and I had to literally rush out of that building. Right? Anxiety, if you've ever experienced it, comes out of nowhere. You don't have to be thinking about anything because where that anxiety comes from is from the subconscious. Back here, not here. Right? So people wonder, how did I get a panic attack? Nothing was happening right now in this moment in my life. It doesn't matter. We stuff our grief down long enough, it needs to come out somehow, some way, and anxiety is one of those ways. So if you experience anxiety attacks, do yourself a favor and reflect on your life and think about all the things that you have not healed from just yet. Because it's all grief and it will come out. Reduced ability to concentrate, kind of along the lines of diminished productivity and poor decision making. Again, I'm going to be transparent with you guys. As an HR manager, I was one of those that coached leaders to manage employees out. I am not proud of that. Because a lot of those employees were grieving something in their life. I remember some of those conversations and them crying and telling me all of the things that were happening. And so I wish I had done things different, better, or more. That's what we call unresolved grief. Reduced morale and motivation is another one. And then unpredictable mood swings and behavioral changes, right? So when you think about your organization and people that are kind of going through some of those things, or you know someone that lost a loved one and they came back to work and now they're not the same, please remember that they will never be the same. Grief changes us. COVID changed us. That was grief. The loss of a loved one, divorce, some traumatic experience, they all change us, you guys. We are an ever-changing human race, aren't we not? As leaders, don't we always say change, it's inevitable. We have to embrace it. But when it comes to our mental health or emotional health, not so much. Right? Think about that. Okay, so those are the hidden costs of grief. Now, really quickly, because I have 10 minutes, 5 minutes. I didn't realize I was talking that long. Okay, so the symptoms of grief. Earlier I said, when I went into my office, I didn't know what to do, I was overwhelmed, brain fog. It's a real symptom of grief, okay? There's 10 that I listed here. Anxiety is one of them, I talked about that. Exhaustion. People are tired. I couldn't sleep after Frank died. So I'd be dozing off, in the middle of the day, exhaustion. But also remember that feelings, that's energy, right? It's energy in motion, okay? So it's exhausting. If you've ever lost big, you will know that, God, I'm just so tired. I'm tired of crying. I'm tired of stuffing it down. I'm tired of feeling. It's exhausting. Okay, appetite changes. We'll either eat because it makes us feel better, or we can't eat because it hurts our stomach to even think about it. Okay, so one of the two extremes. Nightmares, some people have nightmares depending on what the grief was. Erratic behavior, something that you need to pay attention to in your organization, right? Someone who is always jolly and ready to work and support everybody else as a team player, and all of a sudden they isolate or they blow up, right? They have these, these anger, bursts. Why, right? Ask them what's going on. Social isolation. Isolation is one of the biggest things that we do as grievers. Can talk all day about that. Sleep changes, aches and pains. Grief is physical. It's physical. I just had someone reach out to me. I'm going to be connecting with him soon. He lost his wife, and he said, Dar, my pain, it doesn't just hurt emotionally, but I am hurting physically. Like my heart hurts. Is that normal? Should I go to the doctor? You guys, grief is physical. We will feel it in different parts of our body depending on how you're stuffing it down, right? If you're constantly doing this, you're stuffing down your tears, Pay attention to your throat. If you carry other people's burdens, pay attention to your back. If you're like me and you get nervous a lot, pay attention to your gut, right? My stomach always is hurting, like feels funny when I get in front of a stage initially, okay? So aches and pains, feelings are physical. And then difficulty breathing, right? That kind of goes in line with anxiety sometimes. So, those are just some of the real symptoms of grief. They are real. They are not made up. People are not being dramatic. They are still grieving, and we will grieve for a long time. I always say that I am a lifetime griever. My husband Frank will always be in my heart. I will always miss him. And there are still moments in my life where I get sad thinking about him. And that's okay, because grief is normal and natural. Okay, and that's the other thing that you need to remember. Okay, you guys, so I want to make sure that I get to how can we change the narrative? How can we create a safe space for our employees, for yourselves? The first one is to engage with your employees. Who knows better how their work should be done, what they can handle, but the employee themselves. But even a simple, hey, how you doing? I was just talking to somebody at the table out there, and that's what they said. When after my dad died, and my coworker came up to me and asked me, how you doing? When everyone else avoided me, I felt so loved and supported in that moment. How you doing? How's your day going? What can I do to support you? It doesn't cost money to do that. It's human kindness and compassion, you guys. That's all. Okay, the next one is, if you can, because I know everybody's operation is different, but if you can offer a flexible schedule to your employees as they navigate their healing journey, then let's do it. COVID proved that we can adapt. COVID proved that we can work remote when we first thought we couldn't. COVID proved that we can change the dynamics of our business like that, right? So offer these flexible schedules if you can. Come together as a team. Again, ask your employees, how can we make this better for you? Right? What are you doing to take care of your healing, and how can we support that? Okay? Providing additional support while they're at work. I had a coworker as I was going through my grief, and I came back to work, and I knew that it was going to be hard for me to conduct meetings, to do training, to even just sit in a meeting with other people. I was scared, right? It was a fear that I can't describe, but I was scared. And my coworker came to me and she says, Dar, I will come with you. I'm like, don't you have other meetings or things that you have to attend to? And she says, don't worry about it. I'm gonna come with you. And if you feel like you need to walk out, just let me know and I will take over from there. I will take notes, or I will do whatever I need to do. And she came with me to every single meeting until I was ready to do it by myself. That's what I mean about offering additional support. Have that grief advocate, if you will, right? A coworker advocate, whatever you want to call them, to be there with someone that is transitioning and coming back to work, and how they can be there to be supportive of them. Again, does not cost you any money. Find grief experts, right? And get them involved in the highest level of conversations that you can, because it always starts from the top, right? And works its way down. Right? So CEOs, if you're a CEO in this company, if you're vice presidents, or COOs, directors, whatever your job titles are, let's get us to the highest level, put them together with a grief expert, and let's talk about how you can build this program in your organization that changes the narrative and creates a safe culture, so that everybody that is grieving and coming back to work feels safe too. Remember, we spend 1/3 of our lives at work. Majority of our time is spent with our coworkers, not with our families, right? So let's provide that family unit within our organizations, okay? The next one is have grief-informed training to create a grief-informed community. Grief education is out there. That's what my mom and I do. know that before Frank died? You don't know what you don't know. Now we know. And so now we're here to tell you that it can be done. Become more grief informed, right? You can even do it by looking at people's memoirs that have lost others, right? Reading some of those stories that are out. Talk to a griever and find out how they got through their grieving journey, right? Become more grief informed, okay? This is one that I love, and it's my personal preference because I feel like it's important to have, and it's called a quiet room. And I got that idea when I was at reservations in United, and we always had a quiet room because whenever we had an emergency response, we needed a place for our employees to go and detox, unwind after they were taking call after call from family members, right? If the plane crashed. And that quiet room really gave me the idea that sometimes as grievers, if we are coming back to work and all of a sudden we feel overwhelmed or something is happening in our operation and I just need to walk away, a quiet room with nice ambiance of light and maybe some lavender, because lavender helps people relax, a couch, a couple of chairs in there. It really helps your employees to feel like you care enough to have a space. Like, it doesn't have to be a big space, it could just be a small space. If you're a leader and you have a desk, and your employee comes in to talk to you, do not be behind your desk, okay? Because the desk indicates that you're not safe, that you're not open to what they have to say. So you need to sit on the side of them, okay? If they're sitting right here, you need to sit on the side of them. Or you can get away from the desk and have 2 chairs and make sure that there's no barrier between you. Right, that was kind of the effect that I was hoping to get in this session, was no tables, but it's okay, we made it work, okay? But if you're a leader and someone comes in to talk to you, that is how you do it. Or go to your quiet room, right? Because then that gives you the space to let them know, I'm ready to be your heart with ears. I'm here to listen to you, okay? So the quiet room is my personal add-in to all of this. And then the last one is to come up with a grief-related mission statement. So, I'm going to read to you guys an example of a mission statement that you can adopt in your organization, okay? It goes like this. Let me use United as an example. Is that okay? Okay. At United, our mission is to foster an empathetic and supportive environment for our employees dealing with personal loss and grief. We are committed to providing necessary resources, time off, and a compassionate network of support during these challenging times. Recognizing that every employee's journey through grief is unique, we strive to offer personalized assistance to ensure emotional well-being. Our aim is to create a balance between work-life responsibilities and personal healing, thus allowing every member of our family to navigate their path to recovery without additional distress. Because at United, we truly believe that our strength lies in caring for each other. When you create a grief mission statement like that and you have it up for your employees to see, it reminds them that you're safe. It reminds them that they are in a safe culture and that they can come back to work and be okay with still navigating their grief. Okay, that is so important, you guys. So again, these are just some really quick tips for you to help you navigate, to change the narrative, to have a safe culture in your organization. And it takes one person at a time. Every single one of you that are in here now, I'm going to task you. I don't care what your role is in your organization. You could just be a coworker. It does not matter. Because we are all responsible. We're all responsible to both perpetuate and transform how we do grief as a culture. Safe, compassionate, and if you don't remember anything else, you don't have to be strong. You just need to be human. Thank you.